Wasting money on cures. Forgot how to fix myself. They say that time is free. Then why is it so precious? Oh, I'll say memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. Time is running out. Time is running out. Lately I've lost my track. I've sailed the deeper seas, hoping to find something to bring back better times. Oh, I'll say memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. But time is running out. 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 Time is running. Time is running out. But time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over. They can't be over now. Time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over now. Time is running out. Time is running out. Time is running out.
Good evening, everybody. It's John here from Tutor to You, welcoming you along to another of our live streams for A-level law. Tonight we are concentrating on mental capacity defences. Intoxication, that was easy for me to say, wasn't it? Welcome to everybody who's watching us live. Lovely to see you. If you are watching this live, do join in using the chat window if you think you know the answers to the question. Even if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. It helps us with getting some kind of discussion and debate going along. If you're watching this on replay, welcome to you as well. Now, for both sets of people, the PowerPoint that we're using tonight, just a quick reminder, will be available for you to download as soon as this live stream is finished. Now, I'm joined tonight by Liz on the left-hand side of the screen and Gemma in the middle. Good evening to you both.
Hi.
Shall we get cracking?
Yeah, let's go. Okay, so the first case note challenge, you're going to have a little scenario and then you've got to decide which possible defence could be applicable. So do type in the chat box whichever you think it could be. This is really key skill that you have to have in AQA because you have to be able to spot the applicable defences from the scenarios. So Katie's killed her sister after drinking a litre bottle of vodka. So what potential defence could there be for Katie? Do type it in the chat box. We're getting some answers in. Well done. It is, of course, A. Well done to those who answered correctly. Next one. So let's have a look at this one. Marianne became angry after taking some prescription drugs and slashed Eric's tyres. So which could it be? A, B, C or D? There's different types of defences there which it could possibly be. A little bit more difficult, this one, than the last one, which was voluntary intoxication. We're getting answers in again. Well done to those who've got it correct. It is, of course, involuntary intoxication. So here, because they've had some prescription drugs which have been prescribed to them, rather than the previous scenario where they voluntarily got themselves intoxicated by drinking the vodka. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. We're doing so well on this. Well done, guys. Javir steals a car while sleepwalking. What could it be there? A, B, C, or D? Would it be intoxication, or would it be something completely different here? We've got insanity or automatism there as potential answers. Got answers coming in. Well done. Let's have a look. It is, of course, insanity there. Well done. From an internal cause of the sleepwalking. And then we move on to the next one. Lottie stabs her best friend in an argument after taking a mixture of drugs and alcohol. Which could it be there? Doing really well at spotting all these, guys. Type in your answers, whichever you think it could be. Let's have a look. Loads of people getting it right. Yes, Connor, Harry, Violet, just a few there. Voluntary intoxication, of course, because they have taken the drugs and alcohol themselves. Okay, brilliant. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, so here, is this A or B? Would this be voluntary or involuntary intoxication? When you do have intoxication in a scenario, the first thing to ascertain is whether it has been voluntary or involuntary intoxication, because that will, of course, affect the potential response. So, is drinking a bottle of vodka voluntary or involuntary? Again, what's the correct answers in? It is, of course, voluntary. Yes. Next one. Oh, sniffing glue. A bit different. What's that? Voluntary or involuntary? Glue, of course, is an intoxicant. This is a restricted substance, can't be sold to those under the prohibited age. And let's reveal the answer is, of course, A again. Loads of right answers. Okay. Obviously, people have been doing some revision or looking through their notes. They've got this. Well done. Taking prescription medication. Voluntary or involuntary? We have had a similar one like this in the scenario previously. So is it A, voluntary, or B, involuntary? Answers coming in quickly. It is, of course, involuntary. Okay. And then spiking, somebody having their drink spiked with drugs. So you're having a drink, but then you have it spiked with drugs. Is that voluntary intoxication or involuntary intoxication? Have you willingly got yourself intoxicated or not? Let's have a look. Answers coming in again is, of course, involuntary. Okay, well done. Loads of correct answers there. And taking cocaine at a party. Voluntary or involuntary? Remember, intoxication is not just about alcohol. We saw before we had sniffing drugs, we had prescription medication, and here we've got an illegal drug. So is this voluntary or involuntary? Answers coming in, which are correct. It is, of course, voluntary. Okay. Brilliant. And now, once you have decided in a scenario whether it's voluntary or involuntary, the next thing for you to look at is whether it has been a specific or basic intent crime, as the potential response would be different. So here, you're going to give 60 seconds to separate these two these 8 offences into whether they are specific intent or basic intent crimes. So jot them down in the chat box. Let's go. It is indeed a lot to type there. So if anybody just wants to put specific intent and then the different numbers of the offences, please do. But people are managing to work it out and, of course, type it in there. But that is good practice. You won't have a lot of time in the exam to write your answers. So, a bit of pressure there on you. Okay, we're getting loads of answers in. Let's have a reveal. There we go. So we have got specific intent, murder, theft. Yes, Connor got that. Murder, theft, section 18. And then basic intent, and people are getting that correct as well. Well done. Okay, so move over to Liz now to the bubble quiz.
Thanks, Gemma. Okay, so we're going to do the bubble quiz now, which means you'll have a question. There's 4 possible answers, but what's really unique about the bubble quiz is there can be more than one correct answer. So when you're popping your answers in the chat, put how many of the correct answers it could be. So we'll reveal the first question. The first question is, what will be the effect of successfully claiming involuntary intoxication as a defence? So just pop A, B, C, or D, or any of the above into the chat based upon what you think the answer will be. Involuntary intoxication is actually quite complex. All of intoxication, is complex because it could be a full defence, partial. It can depend upon the circumstances. It really depends upon what the offence is, what the circumstances are, what mens rea there is. But involuntary intoxication is quite unique because it will only ever work in one way. So thanks for the answers in the chat, and we can reveal that the answer is A. So involuntary intoxication is really unique because it's either a full defence or it's no defence. So it is a full defence if you can prove that the intoxication prevented the defendant from forming the mens rea, and then you have a full defence because there's no recklessness, in becoming intoxicated. Rather harshly, it's considered that if you are involuntarily intoxicated but you still form the mens rea, you have no defence. So there is no consideration in terms of liability of the fact that it's not your fault for being intoxicated, even if it could be established or argued by the defence that you would not have committed the offence if you weren't intoxicated. If you form the mens rea, you are still liable. That was confirmed in the case of Kingston. So it's kind of all or nothing, so which is considered a bit harsh. Right, we'll move on to number 2. So which of the following would be a bar to claiming involuntary intoxication? So what would prevent you from being able to rely upon it? So again, if you just want to pop your answers into the chat, what letter you think it is. I kind of have given away the answer here. So if you've been listening, you should know. Well done, Violet. We can reveal the answer is D. So, if the mens rea had been formed before the intoxication or even during the intoxication, it's no defence to say, an intoxicated intent is still an intent. So if you had the intent irrelevant of the intoxication, you are then liable. Obviously, anything could be mitigated in sentencing, but it doesn't have an impact upon the liability if you still had the intent. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. So what is the mens rea for specific intent crimes? Again, if you just pop the letter into the chat of the answer that you think is correct. So we can reveal that the answer is D again. So really important, intoxication. As Gemma said, first of all, you've got to establish, is it voluntary or involuntary? Even though intoxication is quite complicated, there's a really clear process and structure you can use in an exam situation. You identify that there's intoxication. You identify it's a common law defence. Its effect can vary dependent upon the circumstances, and there are two key factors for consideration. First of all, is if it's voluntary or involuntary. Once you've established that, you then have to establish if it's a specific intent offence or a basic intent offence that they've committed. Now, a specific intent offence is not something that they commit intentionally. It's when the mens rea of the offence only requires intention. So as you did in the categorise with Gemma, it's things like murder, section 18. They can only be committed intentionally. So therefore, they're a specific intent offence. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So which case confirmed voluntary intoxication will not be a defence to a basic intent offence? I don't know where D has gone. Our answer D has gone. We're having a little bit of a bubble blip, but we'll ignore that. So if you pop into the chat, is it A, B, C, or any of the above? So which case confirmed voluntary intoxication will not be a defence to a basic intent offence? Everyone's got this. Well done. We can reveal the answer is A. Oh, there we go. There's D. And B, actually. So intoxication in terms of cases, I give my students 5 cases. That's all you need to know for intoxication. Majewski is one of them. Majewski is our case that tells us that if you're voluntarily intoxicated and it's a basic intent offence, you automatically have no defence, irrelevant of whether you did intend it or not. Majewski says that becoming intoxicated is a reckless course of conduct, and that satisfies the reckless mens rea of any basic intent offence. Now, that is a little bit misleading because our criminal offences don't just require general recklessness, they require recklessness in relation to the actus reus. Generally, for recklessness, you have to prove that they've foreseen the specific actus reus as a risk. That's, subjectively reckless. They've foreseen the risk of the specific actus reus occurring. However, intoxication, basic intent offences, and Majewski kind of goes a little bit against that. So if you are with an exam board that looks at the evaluation of intoxication, that's one of the key evaluative points. It kind of goes away from our general principles of actus reus and mens rea, but the law has decided for public policy reasons that if you get intoxicated and you commit a basic intent offence, whatever the circumstances, you are not going to have a defence. Okay, and that's confirmed in Majewski and Lippmann. So what is the effect of successfully claiming voluntary intoxication for a specific intent offence? This is, again, a bit of a tricky one, but pop into the chat which letters you think reflect the correct answer. Okay, and we can reveal that the answer is. So typically, it will reduce the offence to the basic intent alternative. So what key in the question here is the word successfully. So if you are charged with, we know from the case of Sheehan and Moore, again, a drunken intent is still an intent. So if you're charged with a specific intent offence and you plead voluntary intoxication and it's proved you've got the intent, it can be no defence. But the most it will be is it will, if you can prove you didn't have the specific intent, as was seen in the case of which now I can't remember off the top of my head. It reduces it to, I think it was Sheehan and Moore as well, actually. It will reduce it to the relevant basic intent offence. So if, for example, you were charged with murder and you were voluntarily intoxicated, but you can prove that the intoxication prevented you from forming the mens rea, you will then be convicted of manslaughter instead. You're not completely acquitted because you've still been at fault and reckless in becoming intoxicated, but it will reduce your conviction and thus your sentence. Okay, so we're going to move on. And next we've got the red herring activity. So you're going to see 4 fish. 3 of them have something in common, and 1 is a red herring, but you're not going to be told the link to kind of add that little extra element in. So we'll have a look at the first one. Lovely sound effects. So we've got 4 offences here: assault, battery, murder, ABH. Always really important to look at defences within the context of offences because you're learning the defence in order to establish how it applies to the offence. So pop in A, B, C, or D. Which one is the odd one out here, which is the red herring? And we can reveal that the answer is B. So the link here, yeah, well done, Harry's. Violet have put B. So murder is the only one here which is relevant. It's the red herring here because the rest of them are basic intent offences. Violet's identified that murder is the only fatal one, which is correct. But in this context of intoxication, murder is the only specific intent offence. So that's going to be relevant when thinking about voluntary intoxication. For involuntary intoxication, it's actually irrelevant whether it's basic or specific. The question is just, did they have the mens rea or not? Okay, so well done. We'll move on to the next one. So here we've got taking prescription drugs, having your drink spiked, drinking champagne on a night out, or taking an ecstasy tablet at a party. So again, pop in. You can just pop in A, B, C, or D. If you want to add in the explanation as to why, that'd be great. And we can reveal that the answer is C. Yeah. So well done there, Connor. So yeah, the link is the rest of them, A, B, and D, are all types of voluntary intoxication, and that is massive. It's the big distinction. The first thing to apply and consider in an application question is what type of intoxication is it? So if they are voluntarily consuming a substance and they know it's an intoxicating substance, it's voluntary intoxication. Okay, we'll look at the next one. So the next red herring. So we've got, this one's a bit trickier. Forming an intent whilst drunk, prescription drugs which have an unintended outcome, intoxication taking away one's resistance, or intoxication which is self-induced. So think about which one appears to, not fit with the rest of them. And we can reveal that the answer is C. So forming an intent while drunk, or intoxication which is self-induced, intoxication taking away your resistance, they are all bases upon which intoxication would fail. Prescription drugs which have an unintended outcome would not necessarily fail, might be considered involuntary intoxication. Connor's popped into the chat here a really, really good point, which is that sometimes if someone was to consume prescription drugs that have an unintended outcome, it could also be a basis for automatism. There's a bit of overlap with intoxication and automatism if there's a lack of awareness that it's going to happen. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. And it's our final activity. So 30-second challenge. It's about listing how many defences can you remember. All centres teach different cases. There are some really key cases, like Majewski is your key case for basic intent offences and voluntary intoxication. So, if we've spoken about cases that you're not familiar with, your teachers have probably picked a different case which establishes the same legal principle, which is absolutely fine. Mark schemes are often not really prescriptive about the exact case. Mark schemes are based upon you have to have a good range of authority. I think you can nail intoxication in 5 cases and have a really, really high scoring answer. So we will start the 30-second timer. Fab. So some good answers coming in. Lots of different cases. The 5 cases that I teach my students. So we've got Sheehan and Moore, which tells us that drunken intent is still an intent for specific intent offences, for voluntary intoxication. The case of Gallagher, which tells us that drinking for the purposes of Dutch courage to later commit an offence is not a defence. They form the mens rea before. and therefore they've got the mens rea. We've got Majewski, which is our key leading case for, that tells us basic intent voluntary, you've got no defence. And then I also teach my students about Kingston, where the defendant was involuntarily intoxicated, but he still had the intent, so he had no defence. And Allen, so Allen is a case from 1998 where the defendant sought to argue that his intoxication should be treated as involuntary because he said he didn't know the strength of his alcohol. And the court said, well, you knew you were consuming an intoxicating substance, and therefore it is a voluntary intoxication scenario. So yeah, some really, really good answers there, some really good knowledge of intoxication, which is a really tricky topic. So well done.
You're not wrong there, Liz. Some absolutely superb answers there. Given I thought there were some really complex questions there tonight. So massive, massive thank you to everybody who took part and gave us their responses there. That always makes it much more enjoyable process. And of course, a big, big thank you to both Liz and to Gemma for presenting those activities. Now, listen, if you found tonight useful, please do give us a thumbs up in YouTube. It helps to get our message out to as many people as we possibly can. A quick reminder that the PowerPoint that Liz and Gemma have been using will be available to download in just a few moments' time. Now, we've got one further live stream left in 2025. That's next Thursday, exactly same time, 6 p.m. So this one's entitled Preliminary Offences Attempts. Again, I had to read that one. So we would love to see you all back next week for one final hurrah of 2025. If not, we'll see you in the new year. So goodbye from myself, from Liz and Gemma. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.